One of the arguments put forward by Putin and repeated by the extreme right in Russia is that NATO promised not to expand into Central and Eastern Europe at the time of the reunification of Germany. Putin claims that NATO took advantage of Russia's weakness in the 1990s to expand eastwards, taking in not only all those countries previously occupied by the Soviet Union in the aftermath of the Second World War, but also the Baltic States, which had been taken over by the USSR when it was in alliance with Nazi Germany in 1940. Putin, like Hitler before him in a different time and a different nationality, seems to identify the aims of Russia as being the same as his personal aims. Russia needs to bow to the will of the strong man, which coincidentally is he. He claims that NATO is aimed at Russia. He has stated this several times, even on an international audience, but most notably at a speech in Sevastopol following the occupation of Crimea. That time he noted that if Ukraine joined NATO, then the whole of southern Russia would be at risk from a NATO attack. Given that there is no treaty that there would be no NATO expansion, we must therefore look to verbal promises, which I think would carry some weight to Putin's argument if it were correct. As far as that is concerned, there's no one better to ask than the former president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev. After all, the negotiations were done by him on behalf of the Soviet Union and not with Putin, who was then a KGB officer in Soviet-occupied East Germany and whose task it was to help the Stasi ferret out anti-communist dissidents in that country. Gorbachev has stated openly a number of times that in 1990 the topic of NATO expansion was not discussed at all, and it wasn't even brought up in those years by anyone. Not a single Eastern European country raised the issue, not even after the Warsaw Pact ceased to exist in 1991. Western leaders didn't bring it up either, he has stated. However, what was agreed was that no foreign troops would be deployed on the territory of the former East Germany. This was incorporated into Article 5 of the Treaty on the Final Settlement with respect to Germany, which was signed on the 12th of September 1990 by the foreign ministers of the two Germanys, the United Kingdom, the United States, France, and the Soviet Union. I now quote the three provisions of Article 5. 1. Until Soviet forces had completed their withdrawal from the former East Germany, only German territorial defense units not integrated into NATO would be deployed in that territory. 2. There would be no increase in the numbers of troops or equipment of US, British, or French forces stationed in Berlin. 3. Once Soviet forces had withdrawn, German forces assigned to NATO could be deployed in the former East Germany, but foreign forces and nuclear weapons systems would not be deployed there. So I think that that's absolutely clear. No nuclear weapons or new bases in the former East Germany. There's nothing about the other countries. Of course, Putin knows this perfectly well. And the records are certainly in the Russian diplomatic archives from the period. Unfortunately, he's had them closed, so no access is available to anyone who might want to disagree with him. But should they become open, you know where to look. However, as I have pointed out in other videos, there is the letter of the agreement and the spirit of the agreement. Gorbachev today believes that NATO expansion was a mistake. Now, at the time Poland joined NATO, I was the publisher of a business magazine, and I wrote an article saying that NATO could expand into the former Warsaw Pact countries only when Russia joined the organization. That way, I felt that it would not seem as though Russia was being left out of the cold, and Russia in the form of the Soviet Union had lost the Cold War. Rather, I wanted to put over the idea that the Russian people had won it. They'd won it by overthrowing communism. However, my opinion was an extreme minority opinion. At the time, opinion polls showed that over 90% of Poles supported the country joining NATO. Responses to my arguments were things like an independent country can do what it wants, and with the example of the 50 years between 1939 and 1989 of Nazi and then communist occupation behind it, this opinion is not unsurprising. I don't, however, think that Putin fears an attack from NATO. On the contrary, what he fears is an attack from the Russian people and being overthrown in a revolution of the type that occurred in Ukraine and might have happened more recently in Kazakhstan in 2022 or Belarus in 2020. Had he not stepped in, of course, to aid his fellow dictators. Putin, like other dictators, needs an enemy, and the enemy he has chosen is NATO. It is the excuse he uses to explain to Russian people the poor living standards that they have had and the lack of controls and checks on his own actions. This is the reason why he needs to control what is going on in Ukraine. This is because, in his opinion, it's his sphere of influence, and he certainly doesn't want democratic countries trying to have a say in what goes on there, or more to the point, the Ukrainian people deciding what goes on in their own country. So I hope you found that of interest. That is my interpretation, of course. And if you have different ideas, then you can write them down in the comments below. Now, one of the things you get is, and I'm pretty certain I will get this from Kremlin trolls, is the comments such as liar, not true. Well, if it's not true, what you do is you make a statement with proof below. You don't say not true. You say this is incorrect because this, and this. And that can be checked. But by making silly statements like liar or untrue, as I've had now recently being at my channel being attacked by these Kremlin trolls, then that's just completely pointless. So I make mistakes, as everybody does, but if you back up your arguments, I will possibly even go along with you. Thanks for watching.